I still remember the sound of clinking glasses that night. The restaurant was small, warm, and lit with golden lights. We weren't celebrating in a grand ballroom, just at a cozy Italian place down the street where we'd had our very first date. He held my hand across the table, his eyes glistening. "For us," he whispered, raising his glass of sparkling cider to mine. "And for the little one coming soon." I felt the tears welling. I was glowing with joy, 6 months pregnant, finally believing that happiness could be this simple. Just him, me, and the tiny heartbeat growing inside me. The waiter smiled politely as he placed our plates, and I thought nothing could ruin this. Nothing, until she appeared. A waitress I hadn't noticed before walked past our table, paused, and slipped a folded piece of paper into his hand. No smile, no explanation. Just a fleeting look that made my stomach twist. I thought maybe it was the bill, but he froze. His hand trembled as he unfolded the note. I watched the blood drain from his face. His glass tipped slightly, cider spilling onto the tablecloth, but he didn't notice. "What's wrong?" I whispered. He didn't answer. His jaw clenched, his eyes wide, like he had just seen a ghost. He folded the note quickly, shoving it into his pocket. But it was too late. I'd caught a glimpse. Just a line of messy handwriting. "You can't hide forever. She deserves to know." The air shifted. The restaurant, once warm and golden, suddenly felt cold. My fork clattered against the plate as I leaned closer. "Who wrote that? What does it mean?" His lips parted, but no sound came out. He just shook his head, his face pale, his body rigid. And for the first time in years of being with him, I realized he was terrified. I tried to laugh it off, but my chest tightened. My baby shifted inside me, as if sensing my fear. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, but my voice cracked. He grabbed my hand, too tightly, and whispered, "Please, not here." Not here. The words echoed in my head. Why not here? If it was nothing, if it was meaningless, why did his face look like a man whose whole life was about to unravel? I pressed again, but his eyes darted around the room, almost like he was searching for someone, or hiding from them. And then I saw it. At the far corner of the restaurant, a woman sat alone. Her posture was stiff, her gaze locked on us. The moment my eyes met hers, she looked away. But not before I noticed the faintest, bitter smile on her lips. I'd never seen her before, yet something about her expression made my stomach churn. He noticed me staring. His grip on my hand tightened again. "Don't look. Please, don't." The panic in his voice cut deeper than the words on that note. I pulled my hand back, my heart pounding. My entire body screamed that something was wrong, terribly wrong. But I said nothing, because part of me was too afraid to ask. The waitress passed by again, her eyes briefly meeting mine. There was pity in them. Pity? For me. And in that moment, I realized everyone in that restaurant seemed to know something I didn't. The note, the woman watching, his trembling hands, the pitying eyes. I thought I came here tonight to celebrate the new life inside me, but instead, I walked straight into the shadow of a truth I wasn't ready for. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing a smile for the strangers around us. But inside, a storm was already breaking. I didn't know what he was hiding. I didn't know who the woman was. I didn't know what "she deserves to know" meant. But I knew one thing. This was only the beginning. My name is Emily Carter, 32 years old, teacher, mother-to-be. If anyone asked me a month ago, I would have said my life was finally settling into something close to perfect. I wasn't rich, but I didn't need to be. I had a steady job at the elementary school, the respect of my students, a modest but cozy home, and the love of a man I trusted enough to build a family with. At least, I thought I did. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside of Boston. My father left when I was 12, vanishing with another woman. I can still hear my mother crying through the walls at night, trying to hide her heartbreak. She raised me alone, working 2 jobs, giving up everything so I wouldn't feel abandoned. But I did. That wound never really healed. It left me with a constant gnawing fear that the people I loved most would always, somehow, leave. So when I met Daniel, the man who now sat across from me in that restaurant, I fell harder than I should have. He was charming, steady, protective in a way I craved, the kind of man who seemed incapable of betrayal. He promised me he was nothing like my father, and I believed him. Because I needed to believe him. I met Daniel 3 years ago at a bookstore downtown. I was in the aisle with pregnancy guides, not for myself but for my best friend Claire, who was expecting her first. I remember laughing when I caught him staring at the exact same shelf. "Either you're expecting a baby," I teased, "or you're terribly lost." He smiled a little sheepishly. "Lost? I'm looking for a cookbook, actually." That was Daniel. Awkward, kind, funny without trying. We ended up talking for an hour, neither of us buying a single book. By the time we left, he'd asked me for coffee, and just like that he slipped into my life. We moved in together a year later. He said he wanted to marry me after we saved up a little more, and I agreed. Marriage didn't matter as much as the life we were building. When I found out I was pregnant, he cried. Real tears. Held me in his arms, saying we'd make the best parents in the world. That's why I trusted him. That's why I let myself imagine forever. But trust is a fragile thing. And the note in that restaurant cracked mine wide open. Even before that night, I'd noticed small changes in him. He stayed out late more often, claimed work was piling up. His phone vibrated constantly, though he always turned it face down when I was near. He brushed off my questions with kisses on my forehead and promises that I was overthinking. And because of my history, because of that little girl who once cried herself to sleep when her father never came home, I didn't push too hard. I couldn't bear to seem paranoid or clingy. I silenced my instincts, convincing myself that this man, unlike my father, would never betray me. But deep down, my fear was always there. And that night, when I saw his face as he read that note, the fear finally had teeth. A detail from earlier that I couldn't shake. When he pocketed the note, I caught more than just the handwriting. I caught a smudge of lipstick on the corner of the paper. Dark red. Not mine. I wear pale pinks, sometimes nude. Never red. The memory kept gnawing at me as I sat there across from him, pretending to eat while my heart pounded. Who would slip him a note like that? And why would it carry a mark of intimacy, a lipstick stain, unless the sender wanted me to notice? And then there was the woman in the corner. Her eyes didn't just hold bitterness, they held recognition. Recognition of him. I want to tell you I confronted him right then, demanded the truth. But I didn't. I was scared. Scared of the answer. Scared of breaking the fragile piece of our lives. Scared of what stress might do to the baby growing inside me. So instead, I smiled through the rest of dinner. I laughed at his nervous jokes. I let him pay the bill with shaky hands, pretending not to notice. But as we walked out of that restaurant, my world was already splitting at the seams. Because now, I wasn't just Emily Carter, teacher, daughter, mother-to-be. I was also the woman who was about to discover that the man she trusted most might be living a lie. The restaurant was just the spark. The fire followed us home. Our house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of neighborhood where people waved while watering their lawns and children rode bikes until sunset. On the outside, our home looked picture-perfect. A white fence, a tiny porch swing, flowers Daniel had planted last spring. To anyone passing by, it would seem like a place where love lived. But when I unlocked the door that night, silence greeted us instead of warmth. No laughter, no easy banter. Just the sound of Daniel's footsteps trailing mine. Heavy, reluctant. I set my purse down, breathing slow. I could feel him behind me, watching. My skin prickled. I wanted to turn and demand answers, but the baby shifted again inside me, and I pressed a hand to my stomach. I told myself I couldn't risk the stress. Not yet. So instead, I tried to restore normalcy. I lit the lamp in the living room, kicked off my shoes, and asked softly, "Tea?" As though nothing had happened at dinner. But he didn't answer. I turned to see him standing by the window, pulling the note back out of his pocket. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it, staring at the words again. I wanted to snatch it away, but something stopped me. Fear, maybe. Fear that whatever truth lived in those scribbled words would shatter me. I busied myself in the kitchen, but my ears strained for every sound. His breathing, sharp and shallow. The crinkle of paper. The long, heavy sigh. Finally, I couldn't stand it. "Daniel," I called, my voice breaking, "please tell me what this is about." He folded the note again, slipping it back into his pocket before facing me. His eyes were red, though he hadn't been crying. Just burning. "Emily," he whispered, "not tonight, please." His words cut deeper than silence. Not tonight. As if the truth could wait. As if my world could stay on hold while he decided when to let it fall apart. I forced a smile, nodding, retreating into the kitchen again. But my chest was heavy with something I couldn't ignore anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel lay stiff beside me, turned to the wall, his breaths uneven. I stared at the ceiling, every tick of the clock slicing through the darkness. And then, sometime after midnight, I heard him whispering. At first, I thought he was dreaming. But no, his voice was low, deliberate. I turned my head just slightly, holding my breath. "I'll handle it," he murmured. "She can't find out." My blood ran cold. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to someone, on the phone. I closed my eyes, feigning sleep, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake him. The next morning, he acted normal, made me toast, kissed my forehead, even cracked a joke about baby names. But I couldn't forget what I'd heard. I couldn't forget the lipstick stain on that note or the woman's eyes watching us in the restaurant. And when he left for work, I did something I'd never done before. I went into his study. His desk was neat, almost too neat. Bills stacked, papers organized, a laptop locked with a password I didn't know. I almost gave up, until I noticed the drawer, the one he always kept locked. Except this time it wasn't. I pulled it open slowly. Inside was a stack of envelopes bound together with a rubber band, all addressed to him, none opened. And on the top, in the same handwriting as the note from the restaurant, was the same message written again and again on the envelopes. "She deserves to know." 2 days after the dinner, I couldn't hold the questions in anymore. Daniel had been restless, coming home later than usual, his excuses flimsy. I wanted to confront him, but my fear always stopped me at the last second. It was Friday afternoon when I decided to surprise him at his office. I'd baked cookies for his coworkers, a gesture I often did when I had time off from school. Maybe a part of me hoped I'd find proof that my doubts were wrong, that he was exactly the man I believed him to be. I drove downtown, my belly heavy, the cookies wrapped neatly in foil. The building was sleek, glass and steel, a place I had visited only twice before. Daniel worked in accounting, and everything about his job seemed predictable, boring even, safe. But nothing felt safe when I stepped into the lobby and saw her, the woman from the restaurant. She was walking out just as I was walking in. Her eyes met mine, sharp, deliberate. This time, she didn't look away. Instead, she smirked. And then, she touched her stomach, a gesture so quick I almost doubted it happened. But no, I saw it. Her palm pressed flat against her belly, a mocking mirror of my own growing bump. My heart skipped, the air thick in my lungs. She brushed past me, the faint scent of her perfume, spiced vanilla, lingering in her wake. I froze in the middle of the lobby, the cookies trembling in my hands. When I finally reached Daniel's floor, his assistant greeted me with surprise. "Oh, Emily, Daniel just left for lunch with someone." "Who?" I asked, trying to sound casual. The assistant hesitated. "A client. I think her name's Jessica?" The name hit me like a stone. Jessica, the woman with the bitter smile. I forced a smile, left the cookies, and walked back out, my knees weak. And there they were, across the street, sitting at a cafe by the window. Daniel and Jessica. His hand was on hers, her eyes locked on his. They leaned close, too close for colleagues, too close for friends. And then, as I watched through the glass, she lifted her sleeve slightly. On her wrist was a bracelet I knew too well, because it was mine. A delicate silver band Daniel had given me last Christmas. I remember gasping so loudly a passerby turned to look. My hands shook so violently the foil crinkled around the cookies. And just then, Jessica leaned across the table and kissed him. It wasn't a friendly kiss. It was lingering, claiming. And Daniel didn't push her away. I stumbled back, tears burning my eyes, bile rising in my throat. The city around me blurred into noise and color. He was cheating. While I carried his child, he was with her. But the betrayal cut deeper than infidelity. Because the note, the envelopes, the midnight whispers, they all pointed to something bigger than just an affair. And when Jessica finally pulled back from the kiss, I saw her lips curve into that same smile I had seen at the restaurant. A smile that wasn't just cruel. It was triumphant, as if she had already won. The next day, Claire, my best friend, threw me a small baby shower. Just a gathering in her backyard, string lights over the patio, pastel balloons tied to the chairs. It was supposed to be my safe place, surrounded by women who had known me for years, women who cheered for every milestone of my life. I wore a soft blue dress that barely fit over my growing belly. Everyone hugged me, gave me gifts, told me how radiant I looked. For a moment, I let myself forget the scene at the cafe, the lipstick-stained note, the stack of unopened envelopes. Daniel arrived late. His excuse was traffic, but his shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, and his eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. He kissed my cheek, too quickly, and handed Claire a bottle of wine. The party carried on, laughter spilling into the evening air. I sat in the center chair, opening tiny onesies, plush toys, storybooks. My friends clapped, snapping pictures, cheering. And then, out of nowhere, Jessica walked in. The backyard fell silent. Even the children running through the grass froze. She didn't belong there. I never invited her. None of us did. She strolled in as if she owned the place, wearing a fitted red dress, her hair perfect, her heels clicking against the patio, and in her hand she carried a gift bag. "Congratulations, Emily," she said sweetly, loud enough for everyone to hear. The air tightened. My friends exchanged glances, whispering. Claire stepped forward, confused. "I'm sorry, do we know you?" Jessica smiled, her eyes never leaving mine. "Oh, I know Daniel. Quite well, actually." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, my fingers clutching the arm of my chair. Daniel rushed forward, his face pale. "Jessica, leave, now." But she ignored him. She set the gift bag on the table in front of me and pulled out a tiny baby blanket, blue, hand-stitched. She held it up for everyone to see. "I made this for your baby," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "After all, he might be the father of both of ours." The world went silent. Every eye turned to me. Claire's jaw dropped. Someone gasped so loudly it sounded like a scream. My heart thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. I looked at Daniel. He shook his head violently, his lips forming the word no. But his eyes, they betrayed him. They were filled with terror, not innocence. And then Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out an ultrasound photo. She held it high, letting the women around me see. "Due in 4 months," she announced. "Guess we'll be raising our children together, Emily." The photo slipped from her fingers and landed in my lap. I stared at it, unable to breathe. 2 babies. 2 women, 1 man. The party dissolved into whispers, gasps, stares that cut like knives. Claire tried to move toward me, but my body felt frozen. I couldn't speak, couldn't cry, my throat locked tight with humiliation. Daniel grabbed Jessica's arm, hissing through his teeth, dragging her toward the gate. She laughed, loud and sharp, her voice ringing in my ears. "They all know now, Daniel," she taunted. "No more secrets." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me shattered in front of everyone I loved. I didn't remember how I got home that night. One moment I was at Claire's backyard, every pair of eyes cutting into me like blades, and the next I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark. My blue dress was still on, wrinkled and stained from tears I didn't even realize I'd shed. Daniel tried to follow me inside, but I locked the bedroom door before he could enter. He knocked, begged, whispered my name. I pressed a pillow over my ears until his voice faded. For days I barely moved. The phone rang constantly. Claire, my mother, coworkers. But I couldn't answer. I couldn't bear to hear their pity. I couldn't stand the thought of being the subject of whispers. Poor Emily, carrying his child while he fathered another. Food lost all taste. Sleep brought no rest. My body ached, heavy and swollen with the baby, but my spirit felt hollow. I caught myself staring at the ultrasound photo Jessica had thrown into my lap. I hated that I hadn't destroyed it yet. I hated that I kept it hidden under the drawer, as though part of me needed proof that this nightmare was real. One afternoon, I forced myself to the doctor for a prenatal checkup. Sitting in the waiting room, surrounded by glowing couples holding hands, I felt like a fraud. When the nurse called my name, Daniel wasn't there. He had always promised to never miss an appointment, but now he was too busy with work. I sat alone on the exam table, clutching my belly, fighting tears. When the monitor filled with the rhythmic thump of my baby's heartbeat, I broke. The sound was beautiful, strong, steady, but it cut me too, because while that tiny heartbeat inside me, mine was splintering apart. The doctor frowned gently, reminding me to keep stress levels low. "It's important for the baby, Emily," she said softly. "Whatever's going on, you need support. Support." I laughed bitterly inside. The one person who was supposed to support me had been the one tearing me down. When I got home, Daniel was waiting at the table. He looked wrecked, hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. "I'm sorry," he whispered as soon as I entered. I never meant for it to happen. Jessica, she's complicated. Complicated. That word slammed into me. He made betrayal sound like a puzzle instead of a choice. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I had no strength left. Instead, I collapsed onto the couch, covering my face with my hands. He knelt in front of me, desperate. Please, Emily, believe me. You and the baby, you're my family. She doesn't mean anything. Then why is she pregnant? My voice cracked like glass. He didn't answer. His silence was the loudest confession I'd ever heard. And then he said something that shattered me even more. She wasn't supposed to keep it. My hands dropped, my eyes locking on his. What did you just say? Daniel paled, realizing his slip. But it was too late. The truth was already out. Jessica wasn't an accident. She was a secret he had tried to erase. That night, I couldn't breathe in the same house with him anymore. I packed a small bag and drove to my mother's. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask questions, just pulled me into her arms. For the first time in years, I felt like a child again. Broken, lost, in need of someone to hold me together. But even as I cried in her arms, I knew this wasn't the end. Because the way Jessica had smirked at the party, the way Daniel's voice had trembled when he spoke of her, I knew there was still more. Something darker than betrayal. And I wasn't sure my heart could survive what was coming next. Living at my mother's house felt both comforting and suffocating. She hovered over me, making tea, fussing over every meal, as though feeding me could mend the fractures in my heart. I was grateful, but I was also restless. Because silence had become unbearable. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's smirk, Daniel's silence, the ultrasound photo in my lap. My thoughts spiraled, replaying every conversation we'd ever had, every night he'd come home late, every excuse he'd made. And the more I thought, the more I realized I still didn't know the whole truth. One evening, while my mother napped in the living room, I sat at her old computer, desperate for answers. I typed Jessica's name into social media. Nothing obvious came up at first. Her accounts were private. But then, in a tagged photo from months ago, I saw her. She wasn't alone. She stood next to Daniel. It was a company event. He had told me it was staff only, just a boring seminar. But there he was, smiling with an arm around Jessica's shoulders, his other hand holding a drink. She leaned into him, her head tilted toward his chest. I felt my pulse quicken. Scrolling further, I found more. Jessica had been around longer than I realized. She wasn't just a fling. She had been at holiday parties, business trips, even group dinners. Always near him, always too close. But then, something else caught my eye. A comment under one of the photos, from a man I didn't know. Crazy how she always goes after the married ones. Married ones. My breath caught. Did he mean Daniel? Or someone else? I clicked on the man's profile, digging deeper, until I found another comment, this time on Jessica's page. She's dangerous. Stay away before she ruins your life too. My hands trembled on the mouse, too, which meant she had done this before. Jessica wasn't just some other woman. She was a pattern, a predator. The next day, I went to Claire's house. I hadn't spoken to her since the baby shower humiliation, but I needed answers. She opened the door cautiously, her eyes filled with pity. Emily, she whispered, I've been so worried. I stepped inside, my voice shaking. You were there that night? You saw her? Do you know anything about her? Claire hesitated, chewing her lip. I didn't want to say this. I thought it would hurt you more. Tell me, I insisted. She sighed. Jessica used to date one of Daniel's coworkers. He told me she has a reputation. She gets involved with men who already have families, and when she gets pregnant, she uses it as leverage. Leverage. The word sliced through me. So Daniel isn't the first? I asked. Claire shook her head. No, she's done this before. Twice that I know of. The room spun around me. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The notes, the lipstick stain, the ultrasound photo. It wasn't just about betrayal. Jessica wasn't simply another woman. She was playing a game. And Daniel had fallen into it. That night, back at my mother's, I lay awake, one hand over my stomach. For the first time since this nightmare began, my grief shifted. It wasn't just sorrow anymore. It was rage. Because if Jessica thought she could use her unborn child to destroy mine, if she thought she could humiliate me into silence, she didn't know who she was dealing with. And if Daniel thought he could hide behind excuses and shame, He didn't realize I was done being the quiet, trusting woman who looked away. I finally understood. This wasn't only a betrayal, it was a battle. And I wasn't about to lose. I thought knowing Jessica's history would bring me clarity. Instead, it only made the silence heavier. My questions multiplied, and the weight of them pressed on my chest at night, leaving me gasping in the dark. I needed proof. Not rumors, not whispers, something solid. So, one afternoon when my mother insisted on grocery shopping alone, I drove back to my old house. Daniel wasn't supposed to be home yet. My hands shook as I unlocked the door, the familiar scent of cedarwood candles hitting me like a memory of another life. The study drawer had already given me a glimpse of the truth. But this time I wasn't looking for notes. I was looking for anything. Documents, receipts, signs of money moving. I found it. Hidden beneath a pile of tax forms was a bank statement. Daniel had been making large withdrawals, thousands of dollars at a time. Each transaction carefully spaced, small enough not to raise suspicion, but steady enough to add up. The destination of the transfers chilled me. Jessica's name. He wasn't just cheating with her. He was funding her. I heard the front door creak open. My stomach dropped. Daniel's voice carried into the house. "Emily?" Panic surged through me. I stuffed the papers back into the drawer, closed it, and slipped out of the study just as he appeared in the hallway. He froze when he saw me. His face shifted. Shock, guilt, then something darker. "What are you doing here?" His voice was sharp, stripped of the softness I once knew. "I could ask you the same," I said, my pulse racing. He raked a hand through his hair, sighing. "Emily, please, you shouldn't be here. It's not good for you or the baby." "Then tell me the truth," I snapped, louder than I intended. "Are you paying her? Is that what this is about?" His face went pale. The silence that followed told me more than words ever could. "And then," he whispered, almost too low to hear, "she won't stop unless I do." That night, I couldn't keep the secret to myself. I called Claire, voice trembling, and told her everything about the withdrawals, the bank statements, the way Daniel looked at me like a trapped animal. Claire was silent for a long moment before speaking. "Emily, I think she's blackmailing him." The word settled into me like ice. Blackmail. It explained the notes, the envelopes, the midnight whispers. Jessica didn't just want Daniel, she wanted control. But why? What did she hold over him that was worth so much money? The next morning I got my answer. A letter arrived at my mother's house, no return address. My name scrawled across the front. Inside was a photo. Grainy, taken at night. Daniel standing outside a hotel, Jessica right beside him, her hand clutching his arm. On the back of the photo were 4 words that made my blood run cold. "You think you know." For the first time I realized this wasn't just about betrayal or even blackmail. Jessica was playing a much bigger game, one that involved me directly. And she wasn't going to stop until she destroyed everything I had left. Something inside me shifted after I held that photo. For weeks, I had been the broken one, the humiliated fiancée, the abandoned daughter, the pregnant woman crying into her pillow. But as I stared at Jessica's smirk frozen in grainy black and white, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. If Jessica thought she could use shame to bury me, she underestimated me. I had been raised by a woman who survived abandonment, who carried 2 jobs while holding her family together. I had been broken before, and I knew how to rebuild. Only this time, I wouldn't rebuild quietly. The first change was small but symbolic. I cut my hair. Gone was the soft, wavy length Daniel used to run his hands through. In its place was a sharp, shoulder-length cut that framed my face in angles instead of softness. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw a woman waiting for answers. I saw a woman ready for battle. Next, I went to Claire. "I need your help," I told her, sliding the photo across her kitchen table. Her eyes widened. "Emily, I know what it is. I'm done crying. I want to fight back, but I can't do it alone." Claire reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You won't have to." That night, we made a plan. Daniel tried to call me again and again. I ignored him. Instead, I reached out to someone else, one of his coworkers whose wife had confided in me before. His name was Mark. When I asked to meet, he looked uneasy, but agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop, where I told him everything. To my surprise, he didn't deny any of it. "Jessica's been trouble for years," Mark said grimly. "She doesn't just sleep with men, she collects secrets, Photos, texts, anything she can use. Once she has leverage, she bleeds them dry. My chest tightened. So Daniel isn't her first victim. No, he admitted, but he's the first who got in too deep. She has something on him, something big enough to ruin his career. That's why he can't walk away. What is it? I pressed. Mark hesitated. I don't know the details, but it has to do with money, some account she tricked him into using. If that ever comes out. He trailed off, shaking his head. My mind raced. Money, that explained the bank transfers, but more importantly, it meant there was evidence. And if there was evidence, I could find it. For the first time, I felt control returning to my hands. I wasn't just a woman scorned anymore. I was a mother protecting her child. I was a fighter reclaiming her dignity. And Jessica had no idea that the woman she humiliated in front of friends and family wasn't lying broken anymore. She was rising. I had spent too long being silent, too long letting shame drown me. That ended now. Claire and I spent nights combing through everything. Bank statements, old emails, even scraps of receipts Daniel had left behind. Slowly, the pieces formed a picture. Jessica hadn't just taken Daniel to bed, she had lured him into signing off on false accounts. Money laundering. She wasn't just after his heart, she was after his freedom. And if she thought I would sit quietly while she destroyed both of us, she was wrong. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Daniel invited me to meet him to talk at a community fundraiser his company was hosting. He sounded desperate. Claire begged me not to go, but I knew this was it. This was where I would take everything back. When I walked into the hall, whispers rippled. Some people still remembered the baby shower humiliation, but this time I wasn't trembling. I wasn't shrinking. I wore a fitted black dress, my hair sharp around my shoulders, my belly strong and proud. I wasn't hiding anymore. Daniel spotted me instantly, relief flooding his face. But before he could reach me, Jessica appeared. She was radiant in red, smiling like the queen of the room. Emily, she purred, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. So glad you came. I was just about to tell everyone about our little arrangement. The room grew tense. Eyes turned toward us. My pulse raced, but this time with fire, not fear. Go ahead, I said, my voice steady. Tell them. Her smile faltered, because she didn't know what I held in my purse. I stepped forward, pulling out the stack of papers Claire and I had copied. The bank transfers, the hidden accounts, every document linking Jessica to fraud. I laid them on the table, my voice carrying clear. Here's the truth. Jessica hasn't just been sleeping with Daniel, she's been blackmailing him. And she's done it before. 2 other men's lives destroyed, but this time, she left a trail. Gasps erupted. Daniel's face went white. Jessica lunged forward, hissing, "You don't know what you're talking about." But I cut her off, pulling out my phone. And here's a recording. I pressed play. Her voice filled the hall. A message she had left on Daniel's phone, one I had found while copying files. Keep sending the money or Emily finds out. And when she does, you lose everything. The room exploded. People shouted, phones came out, cameras flashing. Jessica's mask shattered. Her smile twisted into a snarl as security approached. Daniel reached for her, but 2 men in suits, federal investigators Claire had contacted days earlier, stepped forward. "Jessica Monroe," one said firmly, "you're under arrest for extortion and fraud." Her scream echoed as they cuffed her, dragging her out while guests murmured in shock. Daniel turned to me then, tears streaming, his body trembling. "Emily, please, I was trapped. I never wanted this." For a moment, I saw the man I had once loved, the man who cried when I told him I was pregnant. But then I remembered every lie, every late night, every time he chose silence instead of truth. I shook my head. You chose her. You chose lies. And now you'll face the consequences. The investigators turned to him next. "Daniel Carter, you're coming with us for questioning." His knees buckled as they led him away. He looked back at me one last time, eyes pleading. But I felt nothing. For the first time in months, nothing. Weeks later, the headlines told the rest. Jessica charged with multiple counts of fraud and extortion. Daniel complicit in covering her schemes, facing trial. And me, Emily Carter, finally free. I gave birth to a healthy baby boy in the warmth of my mother's arms and Claire's laughter by my side. I named him Hope, because he was the proof that even from betrayal and ruin, something pure could be born. I wasn't the broken girl anymore. I wasn't the abandoned daughter. I wasn't the humiliated woman at the baby shower. I was a survivor. a mother, a fighter. And as I rocked my son to sleep one quiet evening, I whispered the truth I had finally learned. They thought they destroyed me, but they only made me stronger. It's been 3 months since everything ended. Since the arrests, the trials, the headlines that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Now my world is smaller, quieter. And for the first time in so long, that feels like enough. Every morning, I wake to the soft coos of my son. His tiny fingers curl around mine, his chest rising and falling against me. When I look into his eyes, I don't see Daniel's betrayal or Jessica's cruelty. I see only innocence, possibility, a future untainted by the past. The house feels different too. My mother lives with us now, her laughter filling the kitchen as she hums while making breakfast. Claire visits often, her arms full of baby clothes and her heart steady as ever. I am not alone. I never truly was. There are still scars, of course. Nights when the shadows creep in, whispering of humiliation and pain. But each time I remind myself, I walked through fire and came out whole, stronger. Sometimes, I catch neighbors watching me as I push the stroller down the street. Their eyes used to hold pity. Now I think I see something else. Respect, maybe? Admiration for a woman who didn't let betrayal define her. I've learned something through all of this. Healing isn't about pretending the wounds never happened. It's about carrying them with grace, letting them remind me of the strength I never knew I had. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll love again. Maybe I won't. But for now, my heart is full, with my son, with the quiet strength of my mother's hand on mine, with the laughter of a best friend who never left. And as I rock my baby to sleep by the window, the evening sun painting the sky in shades of gold, I whisper to him, "We're okay now, we made it through." And for the first time in months, I believe it.